Hello and welcome to Cubs on Deck, episode number 3. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and not as always, but today I am joined by my co-host Bryan Smith. Bryan, you're back for the second go around for episode 3. How's it going, man?
I made it back. Not always, but 50% of the time, I will be here 100% of the time.
Yep. Love the Anchorman quote for this episode, leading off the episode here. We got a good one today. I feel like the first couple episodes have been very, very Rule 5 draft heavy, which is like, I mean, that makes sense, right? That's what has been the topic of conversation out there about prospects leading up to the Rule 5 draft that happens. So today we will cover that Rule 5 draft to a certain degree. We'll kind of talk about what happened with that, who the Cubs lost, who the Cubs added in both the major league phase and the minor league phase. Get into that a little bit, but we want to kind of get into some other stuff in this episode too. I mean, there's plenty of things to talk about in terms of Cubs prospects. So we'll talk a little bit. We're going to cover the Brailyn Marquez re-signing. We'll cover that a little bit today. But right now, like the big topic of discussion as far as the Major League Cubs go is the fact that the world is exploding and the Cubs suck forever and ever. Amen. So today we're going to talk a little bit about if the Cubs don't go out and sign a free agent shortstop in Carlos Correa or Dansby Swanson, who as of this recording on Monday night, they're still free agents. They're still out there. But if the Cubs don't go and sign those guys, who do the Cubs kind of have in their farm system as far as playing middle infield, playing shortstop, maybe playing second base so Nico can play some shortstop? That'll be probably the meat and potatoes of this episode. That'll be the big conversation today. And then we'll talk a little bit about what Cubs are doing with the Cubs, or we're Cubs on Deck, but the Cubs on Deck YouTube series. That's going to get tricky when we talk about that. And then we're going to address a few listener questions at the tail end of this episode because we got some good feedback on the Twitters about that. But I don't know. Anything you want to hit on before we just dig right into the Rule 5 stuff here, Bryan?
No, I'm excited that, we're coming at a time where I think the anxiety in the Cubs fan base is so high. And it's totally understandable, but, we're still at a point where not a ton has happened. And so, in a time where all you can sort of address are hypotheticals that exist out there, it's kind of fun to address the hypotheticals of, what if these prospects make the major leagues and talk about that because, there's some actual hope in there versus talking about the hypothetical of what if the Cubs sign no one, 2023 is horrible and there's no plan going forward. We're not going to do that. We're going to be optimistic as prospect writers tend to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love most about talking prospects, honestly. And I know like people are like, oh, like the prospect hype patrol or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's what following minor league baseball is. It's just like it's throwing hype people's ways and getting excited about the future, the possibilities and stuff like that, as opposed to being miserable as a Cubs fan. I mean, I every time I get behind a mic, I emphasize the fact that I'm a Cubs fan. You know what I mean? Like. And so I feel as miserable as some people out there. The Cubs couldn't even go out there and get Christian Vasquez. But again, that's the only comment that we'll have regarding the craziness of this free agent cycle. But all right, man, like I promised, let's get into Rule 5 draft recap at the beginning to start this off, because that's all we talked about so far as the show has existed. So to recap here, we'll dig into the players. In the major league phase, the Cubs selected nobody. By the end there, that kind of seemed like that was going to happen. And then who they lost in the major league phase was Chris Clark, who was not really on our radar. I mean, like he was, but I don't think we mentioned him on the show at all as a potential guy that the Cubs might lose. So the Cubs lose Chris Clark to Seattle. Bryan, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that we assumed when we looked at the players that were Rule 5 eligible for the Cubs is what stood out was the velocity. And, you look at Major League Baseball the last, 5 to 8 years, and velocity has been such a important thing for teams to go out and acquire. But Chris Clark, the reason that Chris Clark was drafted is because he's so good at getting ground balls, something, more popular in the game, 15, 20 years ago. I think if we looked at the Cubs Rule 5 eligible guys 15 years ago and it was this crop of pitchers, we'd probably have mentioned Chris first. You're saying a guy that gets almost a 60% ground ball rate in Double-A, who commands the strike zone well. That's a guy that teams are gonna like. But when you get in this different baseball context, he almost sort of fell off our radar, which we're guilty of. not mentioning him. But it's an interesting pick by the Mariners. I think they think that they can get some skill development out of him to improve the stuff a little bit while maintaining those ground balls.
Yeah, he's a guy that we saw last year was really kind of that bulldog mentality on the mound too, right? We've heard that. I mean, he's a very different guy off the mound versus when he gets on the mound, and he kind of ate a lot of innings. I don't know if he ended up leading the system in innings pitched, but for a while he was up there and leading the pack, and he got outs. He kept his pitch count down so he could get a lot of innings, and part of that is because he got a lot of ground balls, so he trusted his stuff to keep it in the zone. Didn't throw a whole lot of pitches every start out. Yeah, man, you're right. He kind of fits the mold of a guy that was drafted a few years ago. I don't know. I'm thinking back to like when the Cubs had Michael Rucker selected. But this feels different than the Orioles selecting Michael Rucker, right? Where Michael Rucker was still, I think he had just been converted to the bullpen when he got selected, right? Or was he not quite there yet? It was right around that.
I think he'd spent maybe the last 2 months of that season in the bullpen.
Yeah, but this feels like with Chris Clark, I don't imagine they're going to convert him to the bullpen. I don't know. We're not a Seattle Mariners podcast, but I'm guessing they're going to write him out as like a long reliever type role at least, because to me that's what he does so well, is kind of eat some innings and get ground balls.
Although the nice thing is when he was drafted out of USC, he had been converted to be their closer in college. So I think one thing the Mariners might actually see is this is a guy that's been a starter and had, 150 type innings over a calendar year. And this is a guy that's been a closer in the Pac-10 play, in big college baseball moments. So he's versatile enough to maybe be that last guy in your bullpen. And then he's got sort of that core skill of getting grounders that, at the very least, maybe you put him in when a starter's struggling in the fourth inning and you need that double play ball, like something like that. Those are what Rule 5 picks get used for. At the same time, we should probably say that he did go to the Mariners, a team looking to compete. I think the odds are more than 50% he's offered back to the Cubs at some point.
Mm-hmm. Now, my big question is, was he drafted out of the Pac-12 or the Pac-10?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't even know what to call it. I guess it's a Big Ten school now. So
that's true. He was drafted out of the Big Ten. You're right. All right. So the Cubs lost a few more guys in the minor league phase. That was it. That was everything for the major league phase, and it ended up being a pretty quiet major league phase. Not a whole lot of guys taken. But once we got to the minor league phase, we saw a lot more guys flying off the board. And I think that was actually pretty in line with what we've seen in past years from the minor league phase. I guess to remind people, the minor league phase, if a player gets selected, they don't have to stay on a certain roster like at the major league phase. They get selected and they stay in that other organization. Some guys in the past, recently, the Cubs have drafted in the minor league phase are Nick Padilla was drafted and made it up to the bigs this past year. Samuel Reyes is a reliever in the system that was drafted in the minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft. So there's guys that the Cubs have selected and used quite a bit in the minor leagues, all the way up to the bigs for Padilla. So the two guys the Cubs lost were Bryan King and Luis Rodriguez. I know you were particularly Luis Rodriguez was a guy that you had your eye on, kind of expecting to potentially be taken in the Rule 5 draft.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys that's just performed everywhere he's gone. I mean, if you go back and you look up his numbers when he was in the Dominican Summer League, he was like the best pitcher in that league. He dominated in the Arizona Complex League, and then he was sent to Low A this year. Was not part of a rotation. I think his stuff is a little short of what the Cubs were looking for a rotation guy. But then all he did was he struck out like everyone he faced basically out of the bullpen, just with. I think when you watch him, what stands out are the breaking balls and just the breaking ball command and stuff like that. But at some point, the results are the results. And especially in a minor league phase of a Rule 5, like that's a great guy, in my opinion, for the Astros to get. They can put him in high A next year in sort of a swing role and, continue to see if the velo pops a little bit. And if it does, there's a chance. He is definitely a guy with a major league shot.
I could see the Astros doing something good with him for sure. Yep. So, and then Bryan King is a guy that he went down with an injury a little more than halfway through the year. I think it was back in July of last year. Was really good. when he was assigned to a team last year, and then went down with the injury. So I don't know what they think they're getting with him in terms of like when he'll be healthy and all that good stuff. But another guy that showed a lot of promise and got results. Those are two: Luis Rodriguez and Bryan King and Chris Clark. I guess if you're adding all three of those, that just got a lot of results in their minor league season last year.
Yeah, Bryan King didn't make a team out of spring training, kind of like the Jake Slaughter story on the pitching side, but then went to low A and was awesome. And he was so good that when they had a hole open up in double A, the Cubs just sent him straight from low A to double A, and he held his own there. I guess from what I was told, they don't anticipate that he'll be ready for opening day next year, so that injury is going to extend into next season. But the Astros knew that when they picked him, and I don't think they're concerned. They're gonna sort of let that play out.
Yeah, he was a 32nd round draft pick out of McNeese State, somewhere in the 30s there. So I think that draft, the Cubs actually took two guys from McNeese State, right? Between Bryan King and Kane Eckert. Well, I guess, hold on. Am I off on years? Were those the same year?
That's a
I think they
question.
were. I think Bryan King and Kane Eckert were both McNeese State guys, same draft. All right, I want to transition to the guys that the Cubs now have in the system because this is a Cubs prospect podcast. So the three players the Cubs drafted in the minor league phase were Jose Aquino, who is a pitcher, Jefferson Encarnacion, who's an outfielder, and Nick Burdi, who is a relief pitcher. And I was most excited to see Nick Burdi. He was a guy, he's a local kid. I think he went to Downers Grove High School and went to Louisville. Know that Louisville produces really, really good professional prospects. And he's a guy I feel like we've heard about between Nick and his brother Zach Burdi for a long, long time, for whatever reason. Just has electric stuff, fastball that is high 90s stuff, but he just has not been able to stay healthy. But he's gotten major league innings, which you don't get a whole lot of guys in a minor league phase of a Rule 5 draft that has actually logged major league innings in his career.
Yeah, the Cubs actually did this same kind of pick back in the last sort of normal Rule 5 draft. Was they drafted Brock Stewart, which is a name people probably don't necessarily remember, but it was the same thought process, which is, hey, there's through this sort of weird loophole almost, there's a guy with major league experience sort of languishing on another team's at the top of another team's farm system. Why don't we grab him? And it's essentially like a minor league free agent signing. I mean, that's how I would think of the Burdi one. It's just one of many sort of minor league free agent signings they're going to make, which is, they bring those guys into camp, sometimes get an invite to major league spring training. I don't know if Nick will or not, but it's a roll of the dice. And if he can crack that AAA bullpen, then he's absolutely on the major league radar, and that's what it is for him. It's either you make the AAA team or you head somewhere else.
Yeah, that's and the Cubs have done a really good job assembling a pretty damn good bullpen in Iowa over the past few years. So that's exciting to see him probably assigned there, and as long as he can stay healthy. He's been out a lot with injuries over the years, and that's really his big thing is between the injuries and the really lack of command. The stuff is obviously tremendous. It's just his ability to command it, to control it, and stay healthy. If he can do those things, then this is a great, you're right, essentially minor league signing in this Rule 5 portion of the draft. Two other guys. I'll read off some stats here from Jose Aquino. Both of I guess we'll warn the listeners out here. Jose Aquino and Jefferson Encarnacion. Not a whole lot of information on these guys. And it makes me very optimistic about their selections in this Rule 5 draft. And my thinking with this is that it's a real scouting play, in my opinion, right? Where the Cubs are trusting their scouts that have seen these guys play and really like what they have performed, because the numbers, there's not a whole lot of them. We've seen Jose Aquino, for example. He is only 20 years old. He's a left-handed pitcher and spent the last 3 years with the Seattle Mariners. Last year, between the Complex League and A-ball, he was a 20-year-old and he only logged 6 innings. So I'm going to go back to the 2021 stats, if we're using stats as a guidance here, where he logged 43 innings, and there he posted a strikeouts per 9 of 13.5. He walked nearly 5 batters per 9 innings, had a ground ball rate of almost 50%, according to Fangraphs, had an ERA of 3.74. So, I mean, stats that are good but not great. And then, like I said, just logged 6 innings in the States in 2022. So, not a whole lot of information. You're kind of really trusting the scouts here on the Jose Aquino pick.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with both of the guys there, it's guys that, I think that the Cubs scouts probably were more likely to see those guys on backfields, honestly, than they were in actual games. And that's what's cool is that you see that, scouting is something that's not just amateur and, colleges in America. It's something that goes around the globe. And then even when baseball continues, it's something that's happening all the time. I mean, if you go to spring training and you go to the Cubs backfields, every game you're going to see, 5, 6 scouts watching something happening. And so it's good to see that the Cubs who did not lay off as many pro scouts during COVID as many organizations did, they use those guys and they're trying to find some talent with it.
I think that's so cool. Like I think that's it. It means it makes me really enjoy what the Cubs are doing as far as their player development and their scouting and all that good stuff. So Jefferson Encarnacion, I've got his stats in the outfield. He is a 21-year-old outfielder, bats left, throws left. I've got his stats back from 2019 before COVID in rookie league. He posted a let me pull this up here. Sorry. He's got a 250 batting average, a 332 on base, and a 350 slugging. That's good for a 91 WRC plus. Really, the stats, I can read off the stats. They don't really mean a whole lot. Where do you see both these guys getting assigned to start the 2023 campaign?
Well, I think if we think of Birdie as like a free agent signing, a AAA free agent signing, then Encarnacion's basically like a just straight up amateur signing. Signing a little later, but still just an amateur signing where I think he's complex ball is, all you're hoping for there. You're just hoping to get him in your system, build up some strength, build up some skills and put him in complex ball and see what you have. Aquino, I could actually see him making a minor league roster. I don't know enough about sort of where the stuff's at to think if high A is possible, but you're probably looking at an A-ball bullpen role there.
Are you saying you did not see him while you were scouting the backfields in Mesa?
No, I'm one thing I'm never doing is watching other teams' guys in the backfields in Mesa.
Well, now you'll never know the next year's Rule 5 minor league picks. So congratulations.
I can live with that.
All right, man. So we kind of hinted at the minor league signings with Nick Birdie, even though he wasn't. But the Cubs did have a minor league signing. It was actually a re-signing of sorts. They brought back Brailyn Marquez, which was a little bit surprising to me. We saw him get taken off the 40-man roster to kind of make room for the Rule 5 draft here. And he was just brought back since our last episode here. He was brought back on a minor league deal, which is fun. That's exciting. There's no denying the talent that Brailyn Marquez has, and the fact that he was willing and wanting to come back to the Chicago Cubs is a fun thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of two minds about it, right? It's, part of me thinks, or part of me thought going into this process when he became a free agent, they got to the major leagues with him, but then it just couldn't go any further. Injuries and stuff like that were sort of probably too damaging to the relationship, where I thought, oh, he's gone for sure. There's just sort of too much pain in that relationship, probably on both sides. Then, I think the other part of me, and I think the part that sort of won out here, is that the Cubs also know more about his shoulder and where he is in his rehab process than the other 29 organizations do. And I bet when Brailyn and his agent were sort of looking at the landscape, they thought, who's the team that's best suited to get me back on a mound pitching next year? And if I do that, then in a year, I'll have doors open for me no matter what. And so if the priority is just getting back on a mound, I'm going to pick the team that knows my left arm the best.
Yeah, and I mean, I say surprising, I think you kind of walked through it a little bit, but I given the kind of how we haven't seen him in the organization in terms of like playing in a professional game for a while, I just kind of assumed, right, that he would go out and see what else was out there, see who else he could sign with, and because we know that other teams were probably interested in him. I know that he, like, he hasn't played since the 2020 season when he pitched in that one game against the White Sox. But at the same time, like, other teams had to be out there really like shooting for his services on their team, because he's a lefty that throws high 90s and had a slider that was pretty damn good when he was pitching. So it really makes me feel good about the staff the Cubs have assembled, that he trusts in the staff, whether it's the coaching staff, it's the rehab staff, whoever it might be. The fact that he has that much faith in them to come back to the organization, that makes me just as excited as it is that he's coming back and I'll see him pitching for the Cubs again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's worth remembering there's probably not 10 left-handed pitchers on the planet that throw harder than him. And so, you're always going to have an open door in and around Major League Baseball when you can do that. And so, there's just no harm here. There's no harm for the Cubs to take a look. And if they can get him on a mound and see sort of what the last couple of years, more like off the field, we don't really know what kind of shape he's in. And, I mean, if he were to come in great shape and, maybe he's back at a mound pitching in May or June, I don't think it's impossible that he could pitch his way back to the major leagues again. I probably wouldn't bet on it, but, you might as well roll the dice, because this is as low a risk thing as you can do in baseball.
Yeah, I think the re-signing does two things, right? It gets us excited that he's back, and we can be pumped about a guy throwing as hard as he is from the left side, all that good stuff. But also, I think it kind of, as fans, brings their expectations down for him to a reasonable level, And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be hopeful for what he can be. I just think that fans can now be more at the right level of where they should be. Because sure. I think that there were still fans up to the point where he was taken off the 40-man roster and made a free agent. I think there were fans that still expected him to be a middle of the rotation starter for the Chicago Cubs in the near distant future. And that just wasn't a reasonable expectation. And I'm all about, I feel like over the last year or so, I've become all about setting reasonable expectations for prospects.
Sure.
I think part of that is because I've maybe helped contribute to unreasonable expectations, because I like hyping these guys up. And so I've done my best to try to like reel people back in to a certain degree. And I think that this whole process has done that for Brailyn Marquez.
Yeah. I mean, for me, he was, probably he was going to be in like the 25 to 45 range in the farm system. So, I think that's the expectations people should have, is like, you're going to see a bunch of relievers in that range of a prospect list. And, I think he's just one of those guys, but he's one of those guys with sort of 8th or 9th inning upside, which you can't say for everyone.
Exactly. All right, man, we got to the meat and potatoes here of the episode. Yep. Like I said at the beginning here, we want to talk a little bit about the shortstop / middle infield story of the Chicago Cubs right now, because as it stands, Nico Hoerner is their shortstop. Nick Madrigal is their second baseman at the major league level. And we've been shouting and screaming and pleading for the Chicago Cubs to sign one of the shortstops, one of the 4 shortstops. They've already missed out on Xander Bogaerts. They missed out on Trey Turner, was my favorite in the clubhouse to be signed. And then Carlos Correa and Dansby Swanson are still out there. Who knows if the Cubs will pony up the money in order to get them on the team. So let's just run the hypothetical. Let's make fans sad that the Cubs don't sign either of those guys. Dansby Swanson signs the Atlanta Braves. Carlos Correa goes back to the Twins. They go back to their teams from last year. Cubs get no shortstops from this deal. We've heard plenty of times.
We still have listeners if this happens, by the way. Yeah. Will this continue to go on?
I think that people will actually flock to this because prospects are the only thing that matter anymore, right? I don't know. But that's what we're here to talk about, right? So what then happens as far as the Cubs go for that middle infield depth, both of the higher levels and lower levels of the minors, right? Because signing Carlos Correa, signing Dansby Swanson, that would have been to a long-term deal. So guys at the lower levels of the minors would have been essentially blocked by a Carlos Correa at shortstop.
Yeah.
But we're also talking about the Chicago Cubs in 2023 and 2024 when there's guys up in the upper levels of the minors, not many of them, that could have an impact in Chicago and may have to have a much bigger impact than what we initially expected because the Cubs don't go out and sign a free agent shortstop. So how do you want to do this? You want to just start up at the upper levels of the minors and kind of go through what we've got up there and what it means?
Well, let me start here because you mentioned in the last thing we were talking about with Brailyn about expectation setting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, one thing that's important to mention is that when you sort of like look at a farm system of prospects, what is going to happen in pretty much every system is like the most athletic, talented guys, when they enter an organization, tend to enter at shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you'll often see on, probably 20 of the 30 team lists across Major League Baseball are a lot of shortstop prospects in the top 20. And every once in a while, that's where that joke that you'll sometimes see on Cubs Twitter, like the Cubs have too many shortstop prospects. It's like, well, that's the case with every organization in the like very lowest rungs, because the guys they signed that are really talented started playing that. Mm-hmm. But we all go into the process knowing, some of these guys aren't going to be able to bulk up enough to hit major league pitching. B, some of these guys are going to get slow enough that they can't even play anything close to shortstop anymore. And then, who knows? There's so many different things that can happen. So it was easy to look at a Cubs prospect list, I would say 18 months ago, and see, Christian Hernandez, Ed Howard, Kevin Mate, guys we're going to talk about in the next little bit, and say, wow, the Cubs are so flush at shortstop. That's not really the same as saying the Major League Cubs are ready to play a homegrown guy at shortstop, mm-hmm. which I think, as we're going to find, isn't really there for them.
Yeah, and I think that's a good lead into who we have at the upper levels of the minors that can play shortstop, which at this point, there's honestly not a whole lot. I know that that's not what fans want to hear, but unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at. And I think that it's also important to point out that we're going to talk about more than just shortstops, like you said, Bryan, because at this point, Nico Horner can play shortstop, right? So, and that was going into this offseason for the Cubs free agent acquisitions. It wasn't really about getting a shortstop. The shortstops happen to also be the best hitters on the market, and that's what the Cubs needed. But the Cubs also need some middle infield help. And so we're going to talk about some second basemen, potentially some third basemen, and see kind of where that plays out. I'm looking at one guy in the upper levels of the minors that can really I guess actually I'm going to start. We have a list here for the listeners out here. We have a list on our note sheet here of some names. I'm actually going to point out a guy to start off this, because this guy is a actual true shortstop. The problem is he can't hit. We're going to talk about Luis Vasquez, because he is a true shortstop. He's a defensive stud at shortstop, and he is not a starter for a playoff contending Chicago Cubs team, but he does have value as a defensive stud at shortstop. And I don't know. I guess I want to kick it to you, Bryan, and kind of talk about Luis Vasquez and even these other guys at the upper levels of the minors. I don't want to dig in super detailed on every single one of these guys, but what value Luis Vasquez could have at the major league level versus a guy like, I don't know, maybe Chase Strumpf or Andy Weber.
Yeah, it's sort of a different value proposition, and it's a thing that a lot of major league organizations have, which is that sort of, they call it all glove, no hit shortstop prospect. I mean, thinking I can go back and remember, like, Elliot Soto was a guy that came through the Cubs farm system that's had a couple major league cups of coffee. That was like the classic example of that. And Vasquez has been that as well. Max Bain, I did a podcast with last offseason, a pitcher in the Cubs system, if you guys aren't familiar with him. And Max has always been so insistent to me that Vasquez is a major leaguer. He's just like, and I think what that shows more than anything is that pitchers that have Vasquez playing behind him love him, because he's so talented with the glove. And then I saw that guy in spring training this year, and he bulked up quite a bit. And that made me optimistic for sure. So, I don't think I'm not going to try to sell the Cubs have a future shortstop in him. What you have in this kind of player is you have a guy that you have in AAA, and when your shortstop gets hurt, you can call him up and he's not going to kill you. Especially, teams probably throw him fastballs a lot in that first month, and you're just hoping for one of those sort of, he gets really hot and he doesn't hurt your team over 2 to 3 months.
And I think that's what you have a lot of between. I think you're really looking at these three guys: Luis Vasquez, Andy Weber, and Chase Strumpf, that are high minors, right, between AA and AAA. And all three of those guys are not players that you're hoping none of these obviously will replace signing a Carlos Correa or even a Dansby Swanson. But the point is that they have value in their own way, and they could come off the bench. They can make spot starts. They could get a decent amount of at bats, a David Bodie type like amount of at bats at a major league team. Andy Weber brings some versatility where he plays some shortstop, he plays some second base, he can play some third base, and I think he plays a good defensive infield no matter where he's at. And I think he has a really good bat to ball skills that I've been kind of waiting for him to break out a little bit more for the past 3 years or so. And then Chase Strumpf, what you have is, we've talked about him on this podcast in the first 3 episodes already. Chase Strumpf is a guy that came in, was drafted with a really high hit, really impressive hit tool, and now he's developed more power, but he's striking out a ton. He's just but he walks a ton, gets on base. It's the Billy Bean, but does he get on base deal with Chase Strumpf? And he does. He brings offensive value. It's just kind of in a way that Cubs fans have grown to despise to a certain degree, right? Where he's walking a ton, he's striking out a ton. He can be kind of streaky at the plate. And so all 3 of these guys, and Vasquez, Andy Weber, and Chase Strumpf, bring value in their own certain specific way. It is just not a way that you're going to count on manning shortstop every day, or really even manning second base every day.
Yeah, I mean, this is the type of player that you want to either beat down your door with incredible AAA performance where you just can't deny it anymore. But really, I think if you're a healthy organization, you don't have a spot for those guys. So, those are the kind of guys that could do really well in AAA. But you're like, sorry, we got 4 other major league infielders that are just a little better. I mean, Chase Strumpf's probably the one example of a guy that can outperform that. I still have a good amount of belief that Chase can do it. But even his AA performance last year, which was a real step forward in multiple departments, wasn't enough yet to have a major league team plan around him. That's a guy that then has to go to AAA and still get better in multiple phases to be a major league option for a serious team.
I mean, these are kind of guys that we've watched the Cardinals call up. And
Andy Weber is that with, for sure.
Right?
Andy Weber is the guy the Cardinals call up, and he hits 300 for 3 months.
Yeah. Like they're Brendan Donovan, they're Lars Nootbaar, they're insert guys from the past decade, 20 years, not even decade, like 20 years, right? I've grown. I've spent my entire life watching the Cardinals call up guys like this.
Stubby clap.
Yeah. And Andy Weber is that guy. You're right. Like Andy Weber's that guy for sure. And I get that vibe from Chase Strumpf a little bit too, right? I think Chase Strumpf is a little more impressive of a hitter, obviously, but I guess that's the point we're trying to make at the upper levels here, is that the Cubs swing and miss on Carlos Correa and Dansby Swanson and Trey Turner and Xander Bogaerts. They don't really have somebody there to even really hope for to be a long-term starter in the big leagues, in AAA and AA, which sucks.
Sure, yeah. It's not ideal. And I think it's also worth remembering that, we often, when we're analyzing prospects, I think people can skip over AAA as this development level. I think it's easy to do that, to see a guy succeeding in high A and then in AA a little bit and be like, oh, he's major league ready. But the vast majority of major league players need to improve things when they get to AAA and to really show that they're good enough in AAA to earn playing in the major leagues. I mean, there's very few players that don't do that step. And these guys that we're talking about haven't come close to doing that yet, to like really showing in AAA that they deserve the majors. So as far as like projecting major league playing time to them, you just can't do it yet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You want to head down to the lower minors where we can maybe get a little more optimistic on some guys here?
Sure.
I guess we'll start off talking about some guys that at this point on December 12th, 2022 are still shortstops. They've played the majority of their games at shortstop. And at this point we can kind of reasonably project them as shortstops. Again, go back 10 minutes and listen to what Bryan had to say about projecting shortstops. But we got Kevin Made, who was in Myrtle Beach and South Bend last year, Ed Howard, who spent almost the entire year injured, and Christian Hernandez, who you've already mentioned is a shortstop as of right now. I'll also kind of throw Reggie Preciado because he played the majority of his games at shortstop last year, but he is not a long-term shortstop. So let's stick with Kevin Made, Christian Hernandez, and Ed Howard. I guess they all come with some caveats, but they're all guys that we can get excited about regardless of their situations.
Totally. And I think that like you can with all three of them, you can point out the upside while acknowledging the downside. That sort of goes to show why they're not quite top four prospects in the system, top 100 guys across baseball right now. And, with Howard and Mate, to start with them, probably the projected middle infield in South Bend next year, the thing that I have to ask, mostly because we don't know, is are these guys going to age athletically at shortstop in a couple years? You would have said yes for sure with Ed Howard 12 months ago. That was where he was. We just don't necessarily know right now how the hip is going to affect his long-term athleticism. So I don't think we can say with like a ton of confidence he's still going to be good enough, athletically and defensively to be a plus major league defender, which is really what he needed as his carrying skill. And then Kevin Made, when I look at him, I don't know about you, but to me, that's a body that could get worse as he gets older in a way that makes the middle infield untenable.
Yeah. So what's made him, in my opinion, what's made him so good at shortstop is I think that he has a really good first step defensively. And then I think his arm is very, very impressive. I think he probably has the best infield arm strength in the system. Yeah. I'm thinking. I'm pausing because I'm thinking. I think that Kevin Made probably has the best infield arm strength in the system. So where he kind of lacks already is like I think that I could see him like dropping a step or two in terms of like after that first step as he ages, as he puts on some more muscle, as he adds strength. And so that first step might still be there because the athleticism is there, but the body is just too big and too strong potentially. I mean, he's still got ways to go to be too big and too strong.
Yeah,
but sure. I think he could get there to the point where he moves over to third base. At that point, you're putting a lot more pressure on the bat to really be something really impressive because you just have to get more offensive production from third base as opposed to shortstop and elite defensive shortstop, which I think right now he's pretty like he's a really good defensive shortstop. But I don't know. I'm with you. I don't know if the body's going to maintain to the point where he can continue to be a really good defensive shortstop. He can maybe be a really good defensive third baseman, and that has value too. But like you have to also hit if you're a good defensive third baseman.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, we spent a couple minutes here talking about how their defensive skills might not quite be good enough for the majors, and these are both guys that have not yet hit enough to be like plus hit guys that you're projecting moving forward. So it sort of gets into the theme of what we're talking about, which is the skills we see. Mate in batting practice shows you plus power. Almost never shows it in games.
Yeah.
Ed Howard, I really like. I also like what he shows in batting practice. I really like the projection. I could see power down the line for sure. Has really struggled offensively in the minors before losing a year developmentally. So, these are guys that need a large step forward in the way that we see with prospects every year, not in a way that is impossible at all, but a large step forward to like be able to project to be in Chicago.
It's worth pointing out that with Kevin Made, he really performed really well down in Myrtle Beach. And it was a second go around down at Myrtle Beach. And honestly, like I kind of expected him to be assigned to South Bend from the get-go, from opening day, because him with the bat back in 2021 was so interesting to me, right? Where he showed really good bat to ball skills, but he was like the most aggressive hitter I've ever seen in my entire life. Like he was swinging at every, like I know that Jimmy Nelligan wrote something about the at bats that Kevin Made had back in 2021 in Myrtle Beach, and he got to like a 3-ball count, like it was like 4 times all year. It was like something ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And then he came back in Myrtle Beach in 2022 and looked completely different. Like he was much more patient at bats. He was getting the ball in the air more. He was like hunting his pitches. And then he got called up to South Bend, and it just didn't really click the entire rest of the year. So he's still young. He's still going through a lot of changes at the plate, both in his strength that he has in his body, but also his approach at the plate, right? So I'm still pretty optimistic about his bat, but like optimistic in a way that I'm just curious to see how he puts it all together. I'm not optimistic in a way like, oh, he is going to be great at the plate. It's just like I'm curious, because
Yeah.
it's he went through so many changes. Like, what's he going to be in 2023? What version of Kevin Made are we going to get then?
Well, and it's like the skills that you see get developed as guys move through the system. I think the skills that just sort of most naturally develop are you add power and hit the ball harder as you get stronger, which is just something that happens because they're professionals that have to, go to the weight room a certain amount of the time. And then the other thing that happens is you get smarter at taking an at bat. I mean, Matt Mervis just in the last year was such a good example where, Matt early in the year was like, see ball, hit ball. I'm getting a lot of fastballs in South Bend. I'm swinging every single time I see a fastball in the strike zone. And then when he got all the way up to AAA, they weren't throwing him any fastballs anymore. So he had to be really deliberate about when he swung and the kind of breaking balls he was going to offer at. And I think some of that just happens naturally. So if you look at a guy like Made and you say, hey, the things he really needs are he needs to add power and he needs to take smarter at bats. The reason we are optimistic is because those are the hurdles that you can imagine a guy jumping over the easiest.
And that's why you saw some prospect writers really high on Kevin Made entering the 2022 season, and I think people are still high on him for and justifiably so. None of us are as high. Zumac. Yeah, none of us are as high on him as Greg Zumac was entering 2022. But I digress. All right, so we kind of covered the shortstops here. There's
So let me hit on Christian Hernandez.
Oh yeah, we did not cover all the shortstops. I lied. My bad.
So Christian, we think is going to go to low A this year.
Yes.
Had one of those complex league seasons where people judging the stat line are freaking out a little bit. But then I would.
It's entertaining.
Sure. But then I would also say that people that were calling him Baby A-Rod are probably looking in the mirror and saying, yeah, that was probably a little much. When I saw Christian in spring training, I watched him probably 3 or 4 games. And there were a couple games where it was very clear that he was the best player on the field. And then the story I've told a couple times is I saw him play against the Cubs had this sort of Canadian travel, like the best high school players in Canada came and they were playing a tournament and they stopped and they played the lowest guys that the Cubs had in camp. And Christian did not have a good game. And, if you were if that was the only time you saw him, your feeling would be so low on him. But the thing that he is just flashes. It's just, the right day when he times the fastball right. I mean, I was watching video on him the other day and it was like, it's almost like he's getting his whole operation started a little too late. And then he's just relying on just his hands to just get there quick enough. And it's just all stuff that'll get smoothed out in time. But it's I think last year really gave the impression, okay, there's real development that has to happen here. And anyone that was once projecting 2024 on him, no. We're more like 2026.
Yeah, I think that the expectations that he was going to be up to Myrtle Beach pretty quickly in 2022 they were all a little silly in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that he was in the Dominican Summer League back in 21. And I didn't expect him to spend the entire season in the complex league down in Arizona, but I expected him to spend the majority of the season down there. I didn't really expect to see a whole lot of playing time in Myrtle Beach. We ended up getting none of it because he just didn't perform as well down there. But I think we can be a little bit quote unquote lower on Christian Hernandez than we were a year ago, but also how high were we on this kid that we hadn't seen play live yet? Right. We were going based off of quick video snippets on Twitter and whatever reports we got from the Dominican Summer League, which he was obviously more talented than most of those people down there. So I don't know. It's I just think that we had unreasonably high expectations for him. I think we've kind of come back down to earth a little bit. I'm excited to see him kind of take into account everything he's learned since coming stateside, especially, and kind of put that to work in Myrtle Beach next year.
I think the point with him is that if he's not yet a good enough prospect where you're I'd rather sign Dansby Swanson for 5 years than Carlos Correa for 10 years because in 6 years, Christian Hernandez is going to be my shortstop. We're not there yet. And if he gets to the point where he's a good enough shortstop prospect to be sort of having those conversations, that stuff will figure itself out, even if Carlos Correa is on your roster. I promise you.
Yeah, you can find spots for people. They're the best athletes on the field. You can find them a place somewhere for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So how about some guys that aren't really shortstops? They can maybe play some second base, some third base. I'm thinking of James Triantos, of the aforementioned Reggie Preciado, and of Pedro Ramirez, who Pedro Ramirez is kind of a fan favorite, and for good reason. There's a good reason to really enjoy Pedro Ramirez because he has hit every single stop that he's had as well, and at levels where he's been alongside Christian Hernandez up the middle and performing better than Hernandez, and that's always fun. But Pedro Ramirez is a second baseman. He's a second baseman, and really at this point, he's a bat first second baseman that relies a lot on the contact, not as much on the power. And so like that's all. I'm always naturally hesitant with those guys, but man, like he can hit, dude. Like he can really hit. He's got some speed on the base paths too. I don't know how good the defense at second base is, but I don't know. I think he's the most unknown of this group. I don't know. Reggie Preciado is pretty unknown too, but I think that's the problem with all these guys, right? Is they're so young that they're all pretty much unknown.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Ramirez, the thing that jumped out to me was that it instructs the Cubs were trying him in center field, which probably tells you, the defense isn't quite there. He's an interesting one because his body is more like maxed out than almost any time you see a guy, that's succeeding as an 18-year-old in complex ball. Like he's already strong. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to get a full look on video for a year to even really have an opinion, much less like think about how he could rise up the ladder.
He's more like you said, more likely to end up in center field than at shortstop ever. So that goes to tell what Pedro Ramirez is. With Reggie Preciado, we'll cover him because I want to cover Triantos last. But Reggie Preciado, he had a brutal year last year. I mean, with the end, he got off to a really, really, really bad start. And I think that the bad start, he was just pressing because he got off to like that bad start in the first couple of weeks. And it just, the first couple of weeks turned into a longer stretch than that, where he was striking out a whole lot. He tried to fight back, but then he went down with the injury. And by the time he was like starting to get back a little bit, he went down with the injury and he was out for a while. And then he came back and he was just like, he was trying to get back in the groove of things when he was in. It was just overall from day one into the last day of the year, just a battle for Reggie Preciado. And like, I applaud him for battling through all of that, right? That's not easy in your first stint in full season ball. And so I was somebody who was incredibly high, like Greg Zumack was really high on Kevin Made. I was very, very high on Reggie Preciado. I think he was probably my favorite of the bunch that came over in the Yu Darvish trade. And my logic with Reggie Preciado was that like he was a switch hitter that at the time reports were saying that he could like stick around at shortstop, and he can build out some frame. And if he builds out his frame, he can be a third baseman, really like going gap to gap power into as he climbs the ladder, like full blown power. And I just got excited about that, man. Like I was into that, and I've come down off of that to a certain degree, but also like I'm not holding this past year and the rough stretches he had too much against him. What I am holding against him is like I think the swing needs significant improvement and all that good stuff. But like the performance, the numbers, like they were bad, but like we shouldn't expect Reggie Preciado to come back and strike out in 40% of his at bats again in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, there's some hitting coaches that believe that you just shouldn't like let people be switch hitters because the amount of work that it takes to, have one swing that's good enough for the majors is so much, and then you're going to reintroduce and make a guy learn a second swing. And I think about that when I think about him because there's just a lot of developmental work left. There's a long ways to go, and that's fine. And I think there's enough like sort of under the hood skills to have some interest and to have the development staff like really dive in on him like we know they will. And but yeah, it's really far away.
Yeah. James Triantos is the guy that I wanted to talk about the most. I feel like people, like fans, have really, really gotten excited about James. They got really excited when the Cubs drafted James Triantos. I think part of that was helped by Greg Zumac. And then he came, and James Triantos had a really like decent year in Myrtle Beach last year. I think that he didn't exceed any expectations, but I don't think he really underperformed either. I think he did what you'd expect a guy does out, like drafted out of high school, making his full season debut. I think there's nothing to complain about there. And hopefully we see him kind of take off a little bit more in South Bend out of the Pelicans ballpark where it's killer on offensive performance. But I don't know, man. James Triantos is just a guy that still really, really catches my eye. Now, he, again, is not a shortstop. Played the entire year at third base. Like I don't think he logged any innings anywhere besides third base last year, did he? In Myrtle Beach?
I think he might have gotten a few at second base towards the end.
Yeah, and he struggled a good portion of the year last year at third base, but again, growing pains. I don't think that he's a first baseman long term. I know there's been some chatter about that. I don't think he's a first baseman long term, but I think he can play some third base, play some second base, and I really want to see him kind of grow as a hitter these next few years.
Yeah, I think the thing I think about with him is that, this was a guy who was sort of a surprise second round pick.
Yeah.
And I think if you sort of went by the hype that then sort of followed over the next couple months, which was, a guy that at least the community that we're in was really excited that they drafted, and then he really succeeded in complex league ball, it started to probably snowball to the point that expectations were unrealistic. Where, I think if you take a guy who, say that, most teams evaluated him as a third rounder out of high school. If a third rounder out of high school had the year he does in low A last year, teams like across baseball would be excited about that player.
Yeah.
And so I think if like the curve of excitement had gone a little more natural for JT, then he'd be, I think the vibes around his prospect status would be a lot higher. I will say one thing I've told people in the Cubs organization is I'm like very surprised that they went to third base with him. I look at that guy and it's second base, like that he looks to me like just looks in a uniform, the way he moves around the diamond, he just looks like a second baseman to me. I swear, like I can't get that out of my head. And I was like just so surprised that they went to third base. So I still have some hope that down the line, they'll reopen that door.
Yeah, and honestly, like how we've talked about other guys and how they still have plenty of frame to build out, and their body's still going to be doing a lot of changing over the next few years as they get stronger. That's not really the case. I mean, James Triantos he can add some muscle, but like he's already a pretty built guy. Like he's already strong. He already has the frame of like what he's going to look like for the next several years. You know what I mean? Like,
and he's not tall, and like a lot of the times when we talk about projection, we're talking about that huge gap between how tall you are and how much you weigh. And Triantos is short enough and already strong enough that we just don't see that like sort of gap to be able to say projectable.
So now at this point, it's defensively, it's just go get better. You know what I mean? It's not like, adjust to having some new, like adjust to being laterally as quick as you once were, or like it's not adjusting. It's just like go get reps, go get better. Whether it's at third base or at second base or wherever it is, just go get better. And I still believe in the bat like wholeheartedly, because he really showed that he can make contact with a lot of baseballs last year. And that's never been the problem with James Triantos, is making contact with baseballs.
So I started out by saying, there were unrealistic expectations around him a year ago. I'm about to do that with the sentence I'm going to say, which is there are some real similarities between the reason James Triantos struggled in low A and the reason Matt Mervis struggled in low A. Now, that doesn't mean that James Triantos at 20 years old is going to do what Matt did at 24. I think there's some sort of like cognitive development stuff that happens in that time that makes what Matt did going up 3 levels a little easier. But what I could see is James taking a huge step forward in plate approach as the result of like looking back at his struggles and saying like, wow, why did I swing at that 1-1 slider that was like off the plate and only I'm capable of hitting it, but I, sort of weakly grounded out to second base. Like that's the stuff that he needs to get past, where it's like building an at bat to the pitch that you can do the most damage on.
Matt Mervis got really, really good at like hunting his pitches and
Yep.
doing severe damage to those pitches. And James Triantos hasn't gotten that yet. Basically, to
Yes.
summarize what you said, right? Like he
Yep.
hasn't gotten that yet, but he already has the plate approach to be able to do that in whether it's next year or in future years. He's not going to bump up. He's not going to make the AAA next year unless you want to make a prediction right now. But
No, he is not.
but he might put a really strong performance together at South Bend, and I would be very pleased with that. He is the guy that I feel of this whole group of Kevin Mate, Ed Howard, Hernandez, like all these guys we've talked about, especially at the lower levels. He's the guy I feel the most comfortable with, and
Right.
Christian Hernandez obviously has higher upside than James Triantos, like insane upside. But I feel comfortable like knowing what I'm getting with James Triantos to a certain degree, and it's wild saying that from a guy who's not yet, or he might have just turned 20, right? Like very young
Right.
guy still.
Yeah, I mean, almost what I learned from this conversation is like we're not talking about these guys necessarily in terms of who's going to be the guy that makes it to the majors. We're almost saying like, what's our degree of confidence that this is the guy that breaks out when he hits double A in 1 to 2 to, I don't know, even 3 seasons. And those are the conversations we're having, which also tells you like Cubs make other plans and let these guys come surprise you and then adjust.
Yeah, and I think it's also telling that as we're having this conversation, we kind of framed it as the shortstop conversation. But it's important to remember, like the Cubs do have a shortstop in Nico Horner. Like he does exist on the major league roster as a shortstop. So you don't have to develop a shortstop. You need to develop another infield bat. That's the way I've been trying. I've been trying to like frame it that way in my mind. Even though as I'm looking at Carlos Correa, who's a shortstop, and Trey Turner, who's a shortstop, and all the four guys that are all shortstops, you don't need that. It would be nice that he can play shortstop, so you can slide Nico to second base, but you just need an infield bat. And so I think that's why we've included guys like Chase Trump and guys like James Triantos in this conversation, is because they don't have to be a shortstop. Now, would I like to have some more shortstop depth at the upper levels of the minors? Of course I would. Like, of course I would like to have that.
Yeah.
But I guess moral of this whole story is that Cubs might as well just go ahead and bring in Dansby and Carlos Correa.
I'm for it.
All right, man. Anything else you want to talk about on that before we move along here?
No, that was good.
All right. Real quick, I want to hint at. I hinted at it at the beginning. The On Deck series that the Cubs have been putting together on YouTube has been like awesome. So far they've released as of today they've released DJ Hers and Pete Crow Armstrong, which are the perfect guys to lead off that series for.
Totally.
I think like the fact that they did those two guys is like awesome. But like I just love that the Cubs themselves are promoting their prospects and having them come to Wrigley Field late in the major league season and really like making sure that fans knew that they were doing that. I think that's important. Whether the major league team is good, whether Jed in the front office is going for it as far as free agent signings, it doesn't really matter. It's the fact that they're promoting these minor league guys, promoting their top prospects, and like even like the tier below too. Like we're going to see more of these On Deck series come out. I just think it's so cool. I love that.
Totally. The Cubs are generally a really secretive organization, like
Yes.
really, really secretive. And so for them to look and say, hey, our Cubs productions team is the best in baseball, like let's give them something. And then what they gave them was something like really cool, which is they brought these guys to Chicago. They let them all sort of do interviews with the production staff. And then the production staff, I mean, once you give them something, they just run with it in such an incredible way. I can't say enough. I mean, they won an Emmy this week, so kudos to that team.
The documentary style with the minor league vibe is kind of perfect. Where it's like they're kind of cutting their teeth in the minor league levels, and like it just gives off that vibe as we're watching the documentary. And so like I'm excited to see all the ones to follow, and I also love that we share the name Cubs On Deck.
Yeah, hopefully no trademarks on either side, right?
Yeah, we're
not looking for litigation.
Yeah. Yeah. Technically, we dropped our first episode before they dropped their first episode. I don't think that any legal process would see that way, but oh well. All right, man. We got a few questions here that I want to address because there's some really good ones. I do want to lead off. So there's one, two, we got 4-ish questions here. I want to lead off one that was actually not even sent in to us. I kind of posted a tweet on Twitter, obviously, asking for people to send in questions. And this one I actually got from a Facebook group from Matthew Triolo, who posed to the group, Pico Armstrong or Kevin Alcantara, who has the better year in 2023? We're not talking who's the best prospect. I think that we both agree with PCA as of this moment. But which of those two guys, PCA and Kevin Alcantara, have the better season in 2023? I'll let you lead off.
So I'm going to go with Pete. And the reason that I'm going to do it is because this is his first normal offseason as a professional. Last year when he finished, when baseball, I should say, finished in 2021, he was pretty healthy at that point. And I think his offseason was at least fairly normal for what a minor leaguer's looks like during that time. Except the Cubs were very aware this guy missed a lot of time. And so I think that the way they sort of treated his winter and the work that they were doing and stuff was geared around the fact that, hey, this guy missed a lot of time. That's not going to be the case this offseason. Like, he had a full season of work to build off of himself and, sort of go through that mental process. And he also had a full season to show the Cubs the strengths, the weaknesses, and the developmental things that need to be worked on. I just think that normalcy is going to allow him, who has just insanely good instincts. Like, when you match his instincts with now enough reps to sort of know what to expect, I think we could really see a takeoff next year again.
So I'm arguing Kevin Alcantara here, but what you just said really has me teetering to the other side. Yeah, I'm going Kevin Alcantara, and I think my reasoning behind Alcantara over PCA is the levels that they will be at. I think that's my main argument here. Yeah. We'll see PCA likely starting the year in AA Tennessee. It's his first. Well, it is his first first full offseason, first full year going into it strong. Going into the upper levels, that's no joke, right? Going into AA, getting that first taste of the upper levels is that's a tough challenge to take on. I don't doubt the PCA is going to take it pretty well, but it's not going to come super easy to him. I can't imagine. And if it does, then we're talking top 10 prospect in baseball. But I'm going to go the other route and go with Kevin Alcantara, who he'll be bumping up a level too. He'll be bumping up to South Bend, but that's a level in which we get to see his power play, right? Yep. He put up really good power numbers, both in terms of slug and over the fence and doubles and all that good stuff. He put up really good numbers in Myrtle Beach, which is impossible to hit home runs at. It is incredibly impressive what he did in the power department in Myrtle Beach last year. You bump him up to South Bend, which is not a crazy offensive baseball park, but it is whole lot better than Myrtle Beach. And I'm just really excited to see him add some more strength to his frame. He's been posting the videos on Instagram of him getting a workout in. I love to see that. I think that he comes back stronger next year and just has more natural power, but then throw him in that ballpark in South Bend, and I think he could really, really take off. So I'm curious to see how much I think I'm going with Kevin Alcantara, but I'm kind of curious to see how much time he gets in South Bend, because if he spends half the season in South Bend and half the season in Tennessee, then he will be experiencing the same thing I'm talking about with PCA, but just as a midseason call up, which is even tougher, So it'll be dependent on when he gets called up. If he gets called up, I wouldn't be surprised if Kevin Alcantara is just kind of a level by level guy until he reaches the upper levels. But that's why I'm going with Kevin Alcantara here.
Yeah, you make a good argument with the level they're being at being really important. I've sort of had this theory the last, I don't know, maybe since 2021, since we came back from the COVID year off, that the gap between low A and high A was getting larger than the gap between high A and double A. And I thought, we always said that double A was the hardest jump. And I mentioned that to, I'll say, a prominent first base prospect in the Cubs farm system. And he who played at both levels this year, and he disagreed with me quite a bit. He said that the biggest jump that he made this year in terms of the difficulty of the pitching that he was seeing happened when he went from high A to double A. So that is a really significant thing, particularly with just the ability to locate your second and your third pitch really, really changes at those two levels. So Kevin will be able to see a lot more mistakes than Pete will.
Yeah, and honestly, like it's that losing that short season team has made a huge difference in the system. And we've seen it, we've talked about it plenty, like how much it sucks. But you're right, like in low A, we're seeing a lot more of the like teenagers. Like we never used to see this many teenagers in low A. Like we would see some every once in a while, but like last year there's times like at the end of the year when Myrtle Beach was just loaded up with teenagers. And it's like, oh my God, like this is crazy. So that impact has been felt throughout the system. And I think that's kind of what you're hitting at there. So all right, I want to move on. We had a kind of a double question. We got two questions about Cade Horton, which it's always fun addressing Cade Horton. We got a question from Ryan asking, what are your expectations for Cade Horton this year? And we also got a question from Don Hyman asking, does Cade Horton get promoted aggressively if he performs well this year? And I think we can kind of address both of those at the same time. That Cade Horton's an interesting case, right? He's another Big 12 pitcher. It'll probably be dependent on where he gets assigned to start off the year.
Yeah, let me jump in because I was going to ask you. I was going to change the question. If you had to bet money on his original spot he gets assigned, where would you bet?
South Bend. I think I'll go South Bend.
See, I'm going Myrtle.
Okay. What's your logic on Myrtle, I guess?
The Cubs have gone high A with their first college pitcher drafted a bunch in the last 5 years. If you look, if you go back to like Alex Lang, Thomas Hatch, Jordan Wicks, a bunch of those guys made that jump. The difference I think that we really see in this case is that Cade Horton didn't pitch a whole lot in college.
That's true.
Cade Horton's success at the college level was like 5 weeks. Yeah. And so when we're talking about 5 weeks of like being good enough to be in the high A double A conversation, I just think like they're going to go cautious, especially if what we hear is true that they're adding 2 pitches to the arsenal. That'd be my guess. In which case I would think that getting promoted aggressively is in play. Like I would think that if he started to, just destroy in low A, they would be really quick to move him to high A, and then he could finish in double A and we could say, 3 levels for the top prospect. If he starts in high A, it's less likely. We're probably just going to see the 1 level bump, if even that.
Yeah, that answer has way more logic than what I have. I just think he's pretty damn good, so I want to see him in South Bend.
Yeah.
Like, you're right, but you're right, though. I think to kind of address the question of, like, him being promoted aggressively, it entirely depends on his assignment. Like, he will not be reaching AAA in 2023. That's not going to happen. So, if he gets assigned to Myrtle Beach, we could see if he shoves, it could be like a couple weeks. Like, it could be like 3 starts maybe in Myrtle Beach before getting called up. If he like kills it in those first 3 starts, okay, send him up to high A in South Bend. If he gets assigned to South Bend, I think we see a more traditional route where it's like he spends more than half the season in South Bend, even assuming he does like not shoves, but just does pretty damn well. If he's just a good pitcher, I think we see him in South Bend for most of the year, and then kind of the Jordan Wicks treatment.
Yep. I've also heard that the Cubs are going to use the developmental list a lot more next year. They're sort of changing their operation in terms of what coaches are going to be in Arizona next year, and they're going to use Arizona a lot more. So we almost have to bake in that Cade's probably going to spend somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks, not on a minor league roster, working on his secondary pitches with TC and other guys in Arizona.
It could be interesting too. That could lead, whether it's Cade Horton or anybody else, the guys that don't get assigned to a team right out of spring training, and just like start, whether it's starting the year on the development list technically or just an extended, whatever they want to call it, but essentially the same thing. That's gonna be interesting to start off the year next year.
It could be. It would not shock me if that was him.
Yeah.
Especially because you're probably going to limit the innings.
Where are you? I guess to address Cade Horton more generally speaking, where does he land in terms of your pitching prospects? Because I think that's a conversation that's been had plenty on the Twitter timeline recently where there's a kind of a big grouping of guys. Where there's Cade Horton,
Yes.
there's Jordan Wicks. We've seen Hayden Wesneski, Ben Brown. Like there's a big grouping of guys there that I would listen to really any argument for any order of those guys. I'd even throw Daniel Palencia into that group of like I'd listen to it, you know. So where do you stand with Cade Horton as of right now?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The group. To me, I have two guys at the top, which are Hayden Wesneski and Jordan Wicks, and then the next group is a bunch of guys. I would also throw Porter Hodge in, and you'll see me do that when my list comes out. And yeah, I actually think Cade and Porter are like, there's some real similarities in the skill set, and that's a fun conversation to have. So, whether I'll come down with Cade third or fifth, I'm not sure exactly, but they're almost the same thing in this system.
Yeah, and really excited to see him pitch against other professional hitters. That's gonna be. I mean, I will feel way more comfortable ranking him once I see him for a month next year. We're like you said, we're going off 5 weeks of like the actual Cade Horton in the College World Series. So I'm just excited to see him like actually pitch a little bit more. All right, when I go down, we got one more question here from Jake Banowski. He asked actually about one of these pitchers. Does Jordan Wicks find his way to an MLB rotation in 2023? And are we higher on him than Caleb Killian? Which is interesting right now because today on Monday, Baseball America dropped their top 10 Cubs prospects. And on that list was Caleb Killian at number 10, no Jordan Wicks included. So they ranked Caleb Killian above Jordan Wicks, which I personally have not done in my rankings, and I will not do. I have Jordan Wicks ranked above Caleb Killian. I assume you have the same way of thinking.
Yeah, I have Jordan second and Caleb in that next group. But, we talked about guys we were really high on a year ago. I was probably as high ranking with Caleb as anybody. So, I can listen to that argument. I can definitely hear it and understand it. There was some sort of stuff happening with Caleb at the end of the year where, he was like touching 97 to 99 a lot more than he did early in the year. So, there's still reason to be excited, but Jordan is sort of the whole package is there. Everything he needs to throw to succeed in the major leagues, he now can throw in a start. And really at this point, like we've just reached the tweak phase. And so It's just like really small things. And, to answer Jake's question, about him getting to the majors in 2023, I think that has probably the most to do with whether the Cubs are, really caring about baseball in August and September. I think, if they're way out of it and Jordan, who is Rule 5 eligible next year, like, they have to add him to the 40-man roster anyway if he's doing really well and you have a spot open. Like that's always a great chance to give a guy a look in the majors, to also give the fan base like that cookie of a first rounder pitching in Wrigley. And so if they're out of it, I would say yes. If they're in it, I would probably lean no.
I think I'm a little more confident in Jordan Wicks making his debut this year in 2023, regardless of the situation. I mean, obviously I'm more confident if they're not in it. I have more confidence there. But I think I have some confidence too that even if they are competing, I think that he gets some run up in the bigs in 23 in the second half of the year.
There's just so many guys to climb over in the beginning because you got, Adrian Sampson's probably going to be your sixth starter. You got Javier Assad, all that success he had. And then there's Killian. I mean, you're really like, you're needing to climb over like 4 to 5 guys, which is not always the case.
I think to me with Jordan Wicks though, you have a starting pitcher. You have a long-term starting pitcher.
Yeah.
I think Javier Assad, you can eat some innings out of the bullpen. You're using him as you need him.
Sure.
Adrian Sampson is not a long-term answer for this team, I think. Jordan Wicks is just different than those guys, and I think that's why I have the confidence. Because you're right, like you're absolutely right. He's going to have to jump quite a few guys, or a bunch of stuff is going to have to go wrong, right? Like there's going to have to be a whole bunch of injuries and all that good stuff. But he's just different. The vibes are different around Jordan Wicks. He is a starting pitch. Like even with Hayden Wesneski, right? Like where we saw him, like he could be used out of the bullpen even to start off this year in 2023. Hayden Wesneski at the major league level. Jordan Wicks, I don't think you do that with Jordan Wicks. I think that Jordan Wicks is a starting pitcher. I think he's going to be used as a starting pitcher, and I'm all for like using your best pitchers regardless of what role they're in. But it's just, I don't know, man. Like it's the vibes, I guess. It's the vibes of Jordan Wicks, and
I'm really excited to see his new cutter because when he was first drafted, like the first thing I saw when I started to watch video of him was like just like his general vibe, the way he looks on a mound and stuff. Like Cubs fans are just going to see John Lester. They're going to see it the whole time. We're going to hear it so much. And now that we might get some similar pitches out of him, it just makes that comparison, which is so not fair to Jordan, but also still really fun to make. Like I love it. I want to see it happen next year.
This man just has to wear number 34. Apparently, he was wearing number 34 in the minors. I was like, what?
Yep.
Like he's just playing into it at this point. Like he's just playing into it. So yeah, I really like Jordan Wicks. I feel pretty confident, and I would definitely rank him. To answer your question, Jake, I would definitely rank him above Caleb Killian at this point. So. All right, man. I think that does it. That's all the questions that we have time for today. We got more sent into us, and thank you guys out there so much for sending them in. We'll probably continue doing this. We'll do our best to kind of take a couple questions, maybe not 4, but a couple questions throughout the off season and even into the season, just to kind of wrap up episodes here, because I know that people out there listening have always been really, really good about interacting with us on Twitter and sending in questions, whether it's for the podcast or just asking Bryan, me, and you about just anything in general. So. Can't thank you guys enough for sending those in. Bryan, you got anything else before we wrap up?
Well, I'll just say that we're going to get some guys, some minor league real players in here in January and into February. And so, check the Twitter feeds because we'll ask for questions for those guys. And, we can get listener questions for real players who have real expertise instead of, what Greg and I are piddling.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, Bryan, where can listeners find you on anything?
Sure. I'm at Cub Prospects on Twitter, CUB Prospects, and at Bleacher Nation, probably looking late January for the prospect list, but we'll be profiling some guys in the next month that I find particularly interesting.
Any spoilers on who it might be?
I really want to write about Jordan Wogu. I mean, I think that second half is really flying under the radar, and I think if it's a hint of things to come, then that's someone that should be in front of more people's faces.
For sure. I love it. You can find me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. You can find writing over at Northside Bound. I've been doing some videos on the Northside Bound YouTube page. Yeah. I'm kind of breaking down my prospect list. You guys heard on last episode, on episode 2 of Cubs on Deck, Greg and I broke down our prospect list. Well, I am going into a little bit more detail of all the guys I have ranked 1 through 40. So as of right now, you can find my rankings of guys number 31 through 40 and the detailed version of that on the Northside Bound YouTube page, where you might be watching this episode on YouTube. So thank you guys out there for listening, and we will be back in your ears in 2 short weeks. Thank you guys.